I saw somewhere for sale was the Alan Moore script, and under the description it said the script was 250 pages
What?
for a 40-page comic. Al Columbia was Bill Sienkiewicz's assistant during the time of Big Numbers. Al Columbia said Big Numbers was just about the most difficult thing any artist could attempt to do. When Alan Moore developed the series in 1988, he created this huge chart outlining what happened to every character.
Whoa.
And what do you guys think of this effect? And I think like his story is kind of a microcosm of what Moore was trying to say with this series.
He's using fractals, the Mandelbrot set or something, and I'm not a math-brained person. It completely went over my head as to like, how does this apply? What?
Oh, well, by the end of this episode, you will know.
Excellent.
Hey everyone, welcome to Ink Scribes, the comics podcast where we talk about the art and craft of comics. I'm Colin Singh, and these are my co-hosts Eric Zawadzki and Taylor Stauft. Today we're going to be looking at, published in 1990, Big Numbers by Alan Moore and Bill Sienkiewicz.
What is all of your reading experience with Big Numbers? When did you guys first read it?
Colin?
You want me to go first?
Well, I just read it, so...
You just read it? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. No, I actually read it when I was 18, I think.
Oh.
Or I went through this huge Alan Moore phase where after Watchmen, I had to like own everything he ever did. And the funny thing about Big Numbers, it's kind of, I don't know if it's kind of bittersweet because I read an interview before I actually read Big Numbers. I read an interview by Alan Moore where he talked about, I'm paraphrasing, I don't know whether he said it was supposed to be the greatest comic ever created or the greatest comic he ever did or something along those lines.
His
so when I
magnum
actually
opus.
got it, sorry?
His magnum opus.
Exactly. So when I got it, it was hard for me to not look at it and read it as I was going through. I'm like, this is supposed to be the greatest thing he ever did. I'm just like overthinking every panel, every line of dialogue, all of it. Like I was just, yeah, that, especially that one page, which we're going to come to in this, like that giant, the first time I saw that page was probably the first time I ever experienced storytelling like that. So yeah. Anyway.
What about you, Taylor? So you just recently read it.
Yeah, this is just the first time I've read it. It's Moore's stuff was I kind of put a lot of it off as in anticipation of, well, when I'm older I'll get it better. So when I was 17, 18 and read Watchmen for the first time, I was like, oh, that is really good. What else has this guy done? And then some other stuff that I read, it was just kind of, it was a bit impenetrable for my very immature mind at the time. So stuff like this, I'm glad I read it now because I think I would have dismissed it when I was younger. I would have just thought, all right. But now that I have a better appreciation for the research that he puts into things and the overall design and Sienkiewicz's art, because that was another thing that I, as a young man, was not ready for. I would have dismissed the whole thing as kind of pretentious. But now, this rocks. This is...
Yeah, I mean,
it's funny about that.
I read the first issue in like my early 20s. And I mean, it didn't light my fire. I appreciated it, but I only read the second issue only like a couple of years ago. It's something that you can't just casually read because you're introduced to like 45 different characters, and like if you lose the plot a little on like one or two characters, you could get to the middle of issue 2 and just go like, I don't know what the hell's going on anymore.
Yeah.
But I have a new appreciation for it because I did a massive amount of research for this episode, and I understand it on a wider level now. And this episode is me sort of creating a YouTube episode that I would want to watch. It's going to be a little bit different. We normally just look at the art of comics, but there's a couple of writers that I will make that exception for, and one of them is Alan Moore. And so this episode is going to like unfurl like everything out there that we know that this episode was, or that this comic was going to be. So we'll do this episode in two parts. I want to do like an overall history of big numbers. And then in the second part, we'll flip through the comic and go in depth on what was intended with the story and just an analysis of Bill Sienkiewicz's art. Basically, the story behind Big Numbers is it's really fascinating because for a couple of decades after it fell apart, it was this giant mystery, like what happened behind the scenes. It was the source of a lot of rumors and internet theories, but pretty much everything has been cleared up in recent years. I think the behind the scenes story of Big Numbers is a little bit of a case of art imitating life. Thematically, the story is about chaos. And I think the behind the scenes story of Big Numbers is also a story of chaos. Yeah, chaos during like the creative process of creating a comic.
Yeah, I've read that it was about he's using fractals, the Mandelbrot set or something, and
Yeah.
I'm not a math brained person. It completely went over my head as to like, how does this apply? What?
Oh well, by the end of this episode, you will know.
Excellent.
And I'm not a math guy either, but like I have a small, I think I have a small grasp of what all that is. Primarily, Big Numbers is like the story of people, and then the math stuff is just a thematic sort of glue to put it all together. There was a lot of behind the scenes chaos, and I think for a little bit, like nobody was really good with each other after this. Like Bill Sienkiewicz, Alan Moore, Al Columbia, Sienkiewicz's assistant. But I think in the years since, like everybody is cool with each other now. Actually, Eddie Campbell, the artist of From Hell, he covered a lot of the sort of gossipy drama behind the scenes in his Alex series. Which have you guys had a chance to check that out?
Yeah. I read the stuff he sent me. It is gossipy. Like it's weirdly catty.
Yeah, like and I don't want to cover too much of that because part of it feels a little gross. Like I don't know why a fellow cartoonist like Alec is about Eddie Campbell and his life as a cartoonist, and then you have these asides about how like Alan Moore is doing coming up in the 80s and how some other creators are, but then in his Alex series, he has a full chapter which has nothing to do with him, and it's just the story behind Big Numbers, and it's a very one-sided story that doesn't really paint Bill Sienkiewicz in a very good light. But if I were to guess at Eddie Campbell's motives, I think he was friends with Alan Moore, and in his mind, Bill Sienkiewicz really let his friend down. I think for a while, Bill Sienkiewicz didn't speak much about what went on, and so it fueled a lot of rumors, and then you have this Alex story out there, which is one-sided against Bill Sienkiewicz. And then finally he wrote this article. I think it was supposed to be published on The Beat, but for some reason never got published. And then somebody put it up on a blog. And he wrote this entire essay explaining what happened. And obviously it's less one-sided than the Eddie Campbell version, and you really feel for him and understand that like he probably wasn't at his best during this, but holy crap, was it just he created such a difficult situation for himself, and this is probably one of the most ambitious projects like any artist could be involved in. There's an Al Columbia quote that I found. Al Columbia was Bill Sienkiewicz's assistant during the time of Big Numbers. Al Columbia said, Big Numbers was just about the most difficult thing any artist could attempt to do.
It does seem like, because it was going to be 500 pages, wasn't it? That's so many. And it
really 500 pages?
That's what I read.
40 pages over 12 issues. Like each issue is 40 pages, and it will be 12 issues.
That just seems. It does seem like if an artist is working with Alan Moore, the best thing you could do for yourself is just clear your table. You've got nothing else to worry about. Just focus on this, because it is so structurally based or conceptually structurally based. It's just so much that you have to keep going.
Yeah,
it's like a double full-time job, honestly.
Yeah,
comics in general is like all consuming, let alone like take on the greatest task of the most like. I saw somewhere For Sale was the script for issue 3, like Alan Moore's script, and it was, and under the description it said the script was 250 pages
What?
for a 40-page comic.
So he's
Wow.
describing each panel in what,
Oh,
2
man.
pages?
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, interestingly, Sienkiewicz around this, like he talked about like around this time he was at like a convention with a whole bunch of creators, and they're kind of in a circle or whatever, and Dave Gibbons is there, and they're friends. And yeah, he was talking about how he was seeking solace from Dave Gibbons over the hole he dug himself into while working on big numbers. And the impression he got with Gibbons was sort of like, yeah, you don't talk to me, I've done my time. I think if you're an artist working with Alan Moore, it's likely the most challenging project you'll ever be a part of, but it'll also be like the most memorable thing you'll ever be a part of.
Yeah.
So I would gladly take 2 years of like a very difficult task, 2-3 years, and just to be a part of something legendary. But I mean, that's easy for me to say now. Like, what if I'm in like probably a bad part of my life where like, like with Sienkiewicz, it's like he went through a breakup, and I think one of his parents died during this, and he does speak to his he wasn't at his most mature during this with personal
How
life
old
matters.
was he?
So
How old was he?
if I were to guess, he was probably in his mid-30s or early 30s.
1990. So he's in his 60s now, right? So yeah, probably in his 30s, mid 30s.
Yeah.
But he'd been working for.
Your priorities just kind of.
No, that's true. Yeah.
In
When
different
you're a young
chunks
man
of years of your life. Yeah.
and you have nothing going on, you can just burn 20 hours into art. But after a while, no.
Yeah, and there's also a discussion of like what would be a right fit for him. Like working with Frank Miller on Electro Assassin is Frank Miller was very open in his collaboration. Like sometimes there'd be a splash page and it's just like a 1-sentence description. And Bill Sienkiewicz is like a creative dynamo. He needs a large amount of freedom to explore and play and sort of find the art as it goes. And I think the more you handcuff him, the more likely it is to wear on him.
Yeah.
And more scripts are probably very confining. Yeah, I think more scripts probably require more of a like right-brained artist to work on it. And I think Bill Sienkiewicz is more of a left-brain kind of artist. But on the other hand, I think like thematically, this was the best possible Alan Moore project for Bill Sienkiewicz because thematically it's about chaos theory, and Bill Sienkiewicz's approach to comics. I was looking through Stray Toasters the other day, and I always like to ask my wife, like, I'm curious, like, well, what do you think of this art? And her response was, that's multiple artists, isn't it?
Oh.
Because if you flip through Stray Toasters, there's 100 different styles and approaches, and so a story about chaos. He's just an ideal candidate for just a chaotic amount of experimentation and style changes. So I mean, I'm arguing two things. I'm arguing maybe he wasn't the best for this, but maybe he was the best for this. So I don't know.
I think what's interesting about this is that this discussion in general is about Sienkiewicz, but we're not actually thinking, could Moore have loosened up a bit? Like nobody wants to put on to Alan Moore, maybe not 250 pages for 40 pages of comic, which, maybe he isn't capable of, but I find it interesting that he's not. He didn't think to himself, you know what? I could simplify this down. I could let my collaborator take.
Oh man, I don't want to
the
speak
lead
to
on
that.
this.
I don't think.
Yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't want I absolutely love these 2 issues, and I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah,
so,
they're very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into a little more history of big numbers. Just after the mega success of Watchmen, Alan Moore decided to go independent, and that was like all the rage in the 80s. So the
Oh.
first collaboration between Alan Moore and Bill Sienkiewicz was this comic Brought to Light. Have you guys read this?
I haven't. No, you've told me
A
about
little
it.
bit.
I
I
thought it
just
was.
flipped through your copy.
I thought it was actually later. So this is interesting to learn that they had worked together. Now I wish I had known that before before haranguing Moore for his strictness, because obviously they worked together previously.
Yeah, and it's yeah, and it did work out, and it's just you can see, yeah, when I say he's a creative dynamo, there is freedom to do a lot of different things with. I guess like Alan Moore is describing the storytelling approach and describing the page design to an extent, but that doesn't mean you can't play around with like the painting style, the just the color palette, the text. Like, look at the beautiful dialogue, how he's constantly changing the font throughout this comic, which is one of my favorite aspects. I should say this is a telling of the history of the CIA and its sort of involvement in meddling in, South American countries and its involvement in Vietnam and Iran Contra. It's got this anthropomorphic eagle representing the CIA, as this eagle tells the history from, I guess, his perspective, from his bloodthirsty perspective. It's a beautiful comic, and it's not really a traditional comic. It's kind of half a docu comic, but yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting and just beautiful. Okay, so after that, Alan Moore created an indie company called Mad Love. He was sort of egged on by Dave Sim, the creator of Cerebus, who was basically egging everybody on in the 1980s just to go independent. So this was an anthology series. It was all for charity. I don't think any money was made off it. And yeah, Alan Moore just asked all his creator friends to help out and contribute a pinup or a short story. And Bill Sienkiewicz's contribution was the cover. So the comic was a charity it was to fight against Clause 28 in the UK, which was this controversial British law which was designed to outlaw the promotion of homosexuality. But yeah, you can see here it's got a pretty impressive roster of talent. Got like Dave Gibbons and Kevin O'Neill, Neil Gaiman, Brian Talbot, Mark Buckingham, Dave Sim, Gerhard. Yeah, just a lot of impressive creators he got to help out.
Is ARG a magazine that that Moore put together?
I believe it's a stapled, like really thick comic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I should say ARG is, what does it stand for?
Artists Against Rampant Government Homophobia.
Okay, where am I? I found this image on Heritage Auctions, which it's very weird because I'm used to seeing the cover for Big Numbers #1, but somebody sold this original art, and at first I thought it was just tinted differently. It's tinted in this sort of brick red color, but it's actually a completely different painting, and you can tell because her hand is a little bit lower on the final cover, and it's a little bit higher on this original art.
Yeah,
also her shirt is sticking out in a different way.
Yeah,
and
the
reflections and
the curtains and everything. So yeah, it's interesting. I wish I knew the story behind I guess he did 2 versions of this cover.
Yeah.
So I should say the actual comic is like 10 by 10, like album size. But the original art was, I believe, on 16 by 16 bristle board. Yeah, it's a very unique format for a comic, and retailers are known to be a little hostile towards unique, different formats.
Yeah, it doesn't fit into their pre-cut, prearranged racks or anything.
Yeah, even for myself, I don't store them in boxes. I keep them on my shelf. So.
Yeah, and it's easy for us, but like for a comic shop, they're designed to like hold it long term for resale. So if you have like a custom built area for back issues, these comics aren't going to fit, and it just it creates a problem. But it is such a beautiful format for a comic, and ever since I read it, I've always wanted to work in this format. even though everybody tells you don't do it, you need retailers to support and order it, and you will run into a problem there. Which didn't hurt them too bad, because I think they sold like something between 70 and 80,000 for the first issue, and then 40,000 for the second issue. So that's not bad
For an indie comic. Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's why I
especially going back
appreciate
to.
the tabloid size too. I love tabloid comics. Like your Eternal was a tabloid size.
Yeah, I really like working
Right.
in that format.
That
just
was
to
that
change
was
it
a really
up.
nice one. Yeah,
Makes it stand out on the racks too.
yeah.
Like if they can cram it in there.
I got it right behind me.
It's an art piece. Audience, go check out Eternal. It's great.
Yeah,
This
because
is all Chris's
I don't think it
collection, by the
sold
way.
very well.
This
so
is
you can
all
probably
Eric's
still
brother's collection.
easily.
I'm filming at Eric's brother's house.
Okay, so what else we got here? So also you get to see that here's another image I found on Heritage Auctions of one of the early pages, and you get to see on the back. I think this is Bill Sienkiewicz playing around with text, because he lettered the comic as well. Man, he is just an all around great artist. He can do it all.
Yeah.
I just love when he letters his own comics as well. It's just so beautiful. But I don't think the lettering is actually on the pages, because here we have the Heritage Auctions original art with no text on it, or at least you get like faded text. It looks like there was something there originally, and then the final printed piece. This is what it looked like when the text was on there.
Those word balloons like just go together so well. It's just a beautiful like rhythm and flow, with or without the text. Like they not only do they stand out, but there's just a nice rhythm of it over the artwork. It's kind of like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like they're just floating balls of light, you know?
It's like it's undulating through the
Yeah.
pages, like it's a wave or something.
Yeah.
It's just very aesthetically pleasing as well.
That's
Yeah.
what
Like
that's a
these
good word for it. Yeah.
perfectly round bubbles. But yeah, it's interesting to see here, because like clearly there's like a paste up Xerox on there, and you can see that like I guess he's pasted down tape as panel borders.
Yeah, I noticed that, but I've seen that in other stuff of his as well. I have the artisan edition of Electra Assassin, and
This one?
and it's quite. You can see. Well, is that the hardcover or the soft cover?
I think that's a soft,
this is the soft cover, the
Yeah.
artisan edition. The artist edition would be the hardcover.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a little
So
bit of that in Straight Toasters too, no?
I think so. Isn't there? Because that does seem how he kind of blocks off. It makes it feel like each panel is its own creation.
Yeah, and I mean, painters need to like tape down sections to make sure the paint isn't spilling out of the frame, and so I think that's just like an adaptation from his painter skills onto working with comics.
Yeah.
Al Columbia in interviews would talk about like he was the assistant, and so there'd be times where he would just be putting down the panel border tape just to as a way to help him out. But Bill Sienkiewicz described the style on this as a sort of photographic, soft focus, painterly airbrush style, which is extremely time consuming and very overwhelming, and probably just unfeasible to do 12 issues over the course of like an extended period of time. I think there might have been a delay of like 3 or 4 months between issue 1 and 2.
I'm surprised it's that low, because he's got to create all new everything from scratch, like not just drawing on a page, but like putting this page together, physically creating it. It just seems so, which is part of the cool feel of Sienkiewicz's stuff. It's so tactile.
Yeah. Well, only 2 issues ever came out. Yeah, so here's some more original art. So he was going for this soft focus look, and so he was airbrushing, I think, white paint over certain areas, and
that's what it is. Okay, yeah, because it's so blown out at points.
Yeah, and that was very intentional. I guess it was because like the soft focus effect was like like early film, wasn't it? You would see like, I don't know, I would watch like a 1940s film, and everything is shot regularly, and then they'd have the close up of the female starlet or whatever, and then everything would be extremely soft focus, which is very jarring for me because the lack of consistency. But that was just the style of the day.
Yeah, it lets you know this is romantic, which is interesting. It's an interesting use here because it seems like it's got to be part of the overall structure of it, right? Like the construction. Do you think Moore actually told him like, oh, this needs to feel romantic or soft or filtered or something?
No, if I were to guess, I think that was all Bill Sienkiewicz.
Okay.
He describes that, like, you know, as his career was progressing, he was always wanting to push himself and expand and create something new, and to the point where like he'd do Electro Assassin, and that's when he became a painter. Like he started off pen and ink, and then became more painterly with the pen and ink, and then just became painterly doing like full paint for like Electro Assassin, and then like then he's hired for a gig, and they're saying, we don't want you to paint, we want you to go backwards to pen and ink, and it was just stifling for him, but just always moving forward. And then, you know, you get to Stray Toasters, and he's writing for himself, and also he expanded so many skills throughout Stray Toasters. And I think with every project he's just like hungry to be creative and to constantly push himself and move forward. And I think part of the challenge here was, how do you get this sort of soft focus effect? Even though like this is similar to Stray Toasters, where there's like 100 different styles and techniques being utilized. What do you think of like this is the original art, and it looks like the white paint has either faded a bit, or maybe it's always looked like that. And it's just sort of after it was scanned in. Yeah, maybe after it was scanned in, you do some adjustments and it looks like this. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not like time. I can't get a full sense of like what time has done to this page, because they don't look aligned.
Yeah, I don't know. It looks like somebody ran it through Photoshop to increase burn, I think is the term. I'm not really quite clear, but it does look like, no, we need
there was no Photoshop back then. So.
Yeah, it was
we need to
1990,
really
right? 89,
crank
90.
this down. We need to crank up the contrast, which looks like that's not what Sienkiewicz was really going for.
Yeah, I mean, it just looks like some tools he's used on here were not made to last over extended period of time.
That's true too. Yeah, if you're not thinking in terms of your original art being a piece unto itself, you wouldn't be thinking about light damage or acid damage or anything like that. You would just be thinking, well, the end product is what's important.
Yeah. Like I see a lot of artists use those like Presto whiteout pens, and I don't think those are meant to stand the test of time.
No.
So, but this is interesting because earlier we saw he was drawing the word balloons onto the art, and here we have the original art and then the final, and the original art does not have the word balloons on. So between issue 1 and 2, maybe there was a slight change in process, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Probably behind the 8 ball on time, just like, oh no, never mind, do it. Somebody else do it.
Yeah, it was complete chaos for him because he hired like 45 actors, and like over the course of 2 issues, like and they aren't actors, they were regular people. So he hired like 45 people to pose as these characters, and like 2 of them die, and then 1 moves away, and it's just like a kid has a growth spurt, and it's just and that's only over 2 issues. So, you know, you get the sense that like it's just utter chaos, creating the most difficult comic you will ever create. And yeah, it just got away from him, and he had to walk away.
I don't want to say it sounds like he didn't plan correctly, but it does seem like if you're thinking long term and you're hiring people, as an artist, you would do, you know, study drawings of everybody's face and body, just in case, right? Just in case you need like, oh, this kid is now 6 inches taller, so that's ruined. You would think you would have something to refer back to.
Yeah, and he did, because he had all the previous photos to revert back to. But he Bill Sienkiewicz is no slave to photo reference.
Mm.
It just generally serves as a good starting point to launch off of. But every project is different and requires a different approach. And with this one, he challenged himself to follow the reference very closely in order to keep the characters consistent, which obviously proved to be a huge problem. He was juggling like 45 people, and it just got away with him. That was the approach he chose, and I think he looks back and he does think like maybe that was the wrong approach, or maybe he hampered himself too much. But I mean, obviously it became too overwhelming, so that might have been something that went wrong. But for the longest time, we only had a limited amount of big numbers art, but people start selling stuff on auction sites, and so it was only like in recent years that we've got to see these covers, because they showed up on heritage auctions, which is just so fun to see these. Like,
So he sold all of his art for this, right?
Kevin Eastman bought most of it.
Okay. God bless Kevin Eastman, man.
There's an interview with Kevin Eastman where it was from 1998, and he says he bought every page of big numbers art. So I think he thinks he owns every page, but like there's also stories where Bill Sienkiewicz describes like giving the model for the main character as a wedding gift, giving a page of art to her.
Right.
And yeah, I think like there's odd pages that have gone to different people, but for the most part, Kevin Eastman bought everything. And part of that was he bought all of the Electro Assassin art because he didn't want it scattered to the winds. He wanted it to be all together, and he wanted to put it in a museum.
God bless that guy.
Yep. Created just one of the best concepts and in history, and then used his wealth for preservation reasons.
Yeah, a true fan of the medium, and there's lots of benefits to that. So only 2 issues ever came out, and I think Moore and Sienkiewicz had some sort of falling out. There's not too many specifics out there. I think the project was just too overwhelming for Sienkiewicz, and he just couldn't go on. Kevin Eastman comes in though, and he's got a publishing company, Tundra, and he's a fan of these comics, and he comes out to them and says, "What can I do to get this series to continue? You don't have to publish. You don't have to worry about having your own publishing house anymore. You can publish with us. We'll take care of all that behind the scenes stuff. We'll give Bill Sienkiewicz a page rate, and just anything we can do to help." And that was enough to get a 3rd issue published. And so, yeah, Bill Sienkiewicz realized just how overwhelming those first 2 issues were. So he tried a different approach for the 3rd issue, which was more pen and ink style, less with the soft focus, slightly less painterly, which we can see some of that art here. This was never published, but over the last like 25 years or so, maybe 30 years, we have gotten there were slow leaks of stuff. Like there was this Submedia magazine where they showed 10 unseen pages from Big Numbers number 3. That's what you see on the left here, kind of what it was supposed to look like, which does kind of match the first 2 issues, but it is slightly different. It was a little less taxing for him. He was using this craft tint paper as well, which you can see kind of evidence of on this page. Do you guys know much about craft tint paper?
I did look into it. Yeah, it's a paper. It was developed in the late 20s, early in the late 20s, and it's paper with, I think it's silver nitrate applied to it, and then mercury sulfate or something like that. So that what happens is they've applied it in perfectly parallel lines, so that you can use a chemical to darken lines as you want. You just kind of brush it on, but you get these very like machine applied diagonal lines. And I think there's 2 types. There's a set with 1 lines, and then you could get double tone, which had crisscrossing lines, so you could like double up various tones. And they were very popular for graphic artists. Unfortunately, they are incredibly poisonous because of
What gave it away when you,
Yeah,
you said mercury? I was like,
yeah,
what?
yeah. Silver, lead is in there somewhere too. But at the same time, the use of it was highly prized by a lot of artists because you could actually undo the darkening of the lines if you needed to. You could go back and kind of take them back. But yeah, they stopped producing it in the in 2009, and a lot of it is just like, if you're not super careful about fumes or skin contact, it's real bad. It's heavy metal pigments that I think work their way in between your nerve endings, so it's really in you.
The more you know.
Yeah.
Do you think that's why it got discontinued, or?
I would hope so. The thing is, because it stops production in 2009, it's like the poison effect of that it had to have been well known, right? Lead was taken out of gasoline in the 70s. So I think the more likely explanation is things like Photoshop and Illustrator you were able to apply, if that's the feel you want, the machine straight parallel lines, you could do that without any of the toxicity. And I would, 2009, that's around the time those programs are available, learnable for just about anybody, and the staple of design companies. So I think eventually it just unfortunately gave away to technology rather than consumer safety.
Well, and yeah, like that craft tint paper approach, I mostly associate it with Ninja Turtles. The look that Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird were doing on their comics. But there's a lot of 80s comics, like Chaykin's American Flag used it. You see it in a bunch of Bill Sienkiewicz's pen and ink comics. You can see it in you can see the craft tint paper effect in his original art for Moon Knight, New Mutants. I associate it very much with the 80s. You don't see much of it in the 90s or the 2000s. And so I can understand it's like, 20 years of a slow attrition of sales of this paper, and then they just go out of business. But yeah, who knows what the reason was.
I think it's a lot of things, because the company that makes it gets bought several times, and eventually there's somebody drawing a line under something, and duotone is at the bottom. This craft paper is at the bottom, just above that line, and every year it creeps up just a bit too much. But
so I should say that I'm comparing what it was sort of intended to look like, these preview pages released in Submedia magazine, and then also in 2009, photocopies of the complete lettered art for Big Numbers #3 surfaced on eBay, and the purchaser contacted Moore and got permission to release it on the internet. And so that's why we've been able to read the third issue through these terrible Xerox copies of the art. You can see the comparison of what it was intended to look like and then what we got to read for the third issue, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, that's bad.
Because you could see the comparison here. Just looking at panel 2 just becomes kind of a mess. And you just beautiful work by Sienkiewicz that again just becomes a giant mess. But that's the only way you can read the full version of issue 3. So some pages were released as tiny images in a 1998 Comics Journal interview with Kevin Eastman, because he I think he owns all this art. And there's the Submedia magazine, and then the Xeroxes, and then there were a bunch sold on heritage auctions. So yeah, it's 4 or 5 different ways that we've been able to see it. But primarily we just look at the compiled photocopies.
Yeah, it's such a stark difference between all the different versions.
So from the moment those Xerox copies showed up on the internet, we finally had 3 issues to read. As we stated before, Bill Sienkiewicz started using this craft tint paper in order to speed up his process. He figured the style shift would work within the context of the story, a story about chaos theory. And by that point, his personal life had gone to hell, and the process he felt it boxed himself in. And it was just too much for him. So he just exited. He said it was just imperative that he exit and just like go and work on advertising or illustration work. Probably, I'd assume, imperative for like his sanity. Yeah, just a lot fell apart. He even had a falling out with his assistant Al Columbia.
Yeah.
But Tundra was determined to keep it alive. Kevin Eastman wanted this series to continue, and they were dealing with Alan Moore saying, like, how can we keep this alive? They went up to Al Columbia and they asked him if he wanted to do it. This is a comic Al Columbia did for Tundra called Doghead. And you can look at these pages, and he trained under Bill Sienkiewicz. He worked under Bill Sienkiewicz for a year and learned all his tricks. And he said it was just an amazing experience. And you can look at this and say, yeah, this guy can definitely take over for big numbers. Like, look at this art.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So he signed on. They get Al Columbia to agree to it, and then it takes probably about a year to negotiate stuff because Bill Sienkiewicz had a falling out with Al Columbia, and so he was a little uneasy about giving his baby to anybody. And so there was about a year of negotiation while Al Columbia was working on Doghead. And by the time it gets time for him to start working on Big Numbers number 4, Al Columbia is in a different headspace, and he's just kind of, I guess, not feeling it anymore. And
what a strange, what a strange place to be in. Like, I don't know if I really want to work with the greatest comic writer of all time and get paid by the guy that made the Ninja Turtles. I don't know.
Yeah, he was 21 years old, and I guess he was seen as this like wonderkind, and that's a lot of pressure. That's everybody's basically saying, do you know what an opportunity this is? Do you know you're working on Alan Moore's magnum opus? And and then he looks at the contract and he's like, this is just a work for hire contract, which Tundra doesn't do work for hire contracts. Tundra hires artists, and it's all about creator ownership.
Yeah.
But Al Columbia was given this work for hire project, and he's going to like break his back working on probably one of the most difficult comics. What did I say his quote was? Like, probably one of the most difficult comics any artist could ever work on.
Yeah.
And
he doesn't own it.
And he got a little frustrated, and he did sign on to be a Bill Sienkiewicz clone. And that started to wear on him because Doghead looks like Bill Sienkiewicz artwork, but everything he did after that is uniquely Al Columbia. He's got a very unique vision, unlike anybody else. And you could tell that this might have been the phase of a 21-year-old, like working off like his favorite, like a style of his favorite artist, and you slowly shake that off. But he apparently drew Big Numbers number 4, and
I think I can appreciate that. Then him leaving the book then, because I could definitely understand. Hey, I'm going to be making this. It's for Alan Moore. It's not with Alan Moore, and there's a real good chance that everybody confuses my work for the more famous guy. I retract my previous statement.
Yeah, it's sort of like be invisible. You're not Al Columbia. You are a Bill Sienkiewicz clone.
Yeah.
And
ghost drawing.
Yeah, so he was in a different town, and he went from Bill Sienkiewicz by this point. And he says he went and hired like 45 similar looking actors, not actors, but like he tried to find similar looking people, and he like did the whole photo shoot thing, and Kevin Eastman paid him in advance and also paid him for the original art. So Kevin Eastman paid him like $20,000 for issue 4. Basically, he goes and creates the artwork, but it's starting to get to his head, and he's consulting with other artists, and he's showing the contract to other artists. And a lot of these artists are saying like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is work for hire. You don't even own this. It doesn't even technically say you legally have to hand the art in. There's nothing in here about how, like, you can go destroy the art, and and you'll be okay.
Whoa.
Yeah, that was a whole kerfuffle about Tundra itself, but we'll get into that.
The Tundra story is fascinating. I would recommend people go read the Comics Journal.
We'll do a deep dive on that too in the future. Sure.
So Al Columbia So Kevin Eastman actually gave him a studio, like above the Tundra office, and he was working away in that. But I guess he had the pile of artwork and he was going to hand it in, and then Al Columbia basically asked, can I have another day to do some touch-ups or something like that. And then the art was never seen again. Basically, there was a lot of mystery about what happened. He claims that he just destroyed the art. His story is that his friend was in a band and they wanted him to do a cover, and that guy was he was interested in collage art for album covers. So hey, let's cut up all this artwork of yours and create a collage for the cover. Which we don't know if that's the full story, because that album cover has never surfaced. There is only one piece of art from Big Numbers, that number 4, that has surfaced, which was like, Kevin Eastman went up to that studio and found a cut up figure on the ground, and which Kevin Eastman published Infectious, and can you find that cut up figure that he pasted onto the cover?
A mystery that has haunted.
Bottom corner,
it's right there.
Ah.
In the cover, in the corner there, which is Kevin Eastman basically says that's a $20,000 drawing.
Oh my God!
He paid $20,000 to draw Big Numbers number 4 and for the original art, and this is all he got from it.
That's wow. That's
well. You know what? You can cut this part out if you want, but that's really shitty of a human being to do to another human being.
Yeah, that's
end quote.
Yeah, Kevin Eastman was, I guess, not pleased. One could say.
Yeah,
that's
and
fuck that guy. I'm just saying.
Yeah, so Al Columbia was living in town. Interestingly, that was a small town in the United States called Northampton. That's where Tundra was, and where Al Columbia was living. And he was around town, and the people at Tundra were just hounding him. He was working at a restaurant, maybe, and he was being hounded at the restaurant, like, where is this art? Yeah, they never found it.
Wow.
But
he wakes up every morning and looks at it and goes, never again.
It'd be hilarious if it still existed.
Yeah, just in its entirety.
So the thing is that a lot of this story only came out after the fact, but there was like a long time where there were just rumors and just like stories going around about just like what happened with Big Numbers number 4. I heard this and I heard that, and people posting on the internet different stories. But I mean, this is the general consensus of everything that I believe has happened. Now, just a quick little end to the history here. When Alan Moore developed the series in 1988, he created this huge chart outlining what happened to every character.
Whoa!
You can see on the left here is every character.
Paper, right? That's on A1 paper, right?
I believe so. Yeah. Just a giant piece of paper, and this chart was spoken about, and Alan Moore referenced it in interviews. He talked about how like he would show it to his fellow writers just to make them like they would, like, Neil Gaiman would just be in awe at this thing.
Yeah, I remember Neil Gaiman talking about it.
Yeah.
In an interview.
So this chart was spoken about a lot, but it finally showed up, a small version of it, in this 2011 book. It's like a coffee table book, Alan Moore Storyteller.
Huh.
And pretty difficult to read. But still, like, this is a big thing that was finally released after all this time. And in 2020, somebody, as a pandemic project, decided to decipher it all and put it on the internet. And so you can find this website where somebody has figured it all out and created this like nice little chart that I used as a reference for this episode. Also on that website is this transcript of a taped conversation held between Alan Moore and a film producer and a screenwriter, in which Moore discussed his intent for Big Numbers for a potential TV show. I think it was done in the late 90s, but 30 pages of that transcript have made it online.
Whoa.
So paired with this and that transcript, you can figure out quite a bit of what Alan Moore intended for all the characters and for the themes of the project, and just generally what the comic was going to be about. And so I read all that stuff, and we're going to flip through the comic, and I'm going to point out everything that was intended for all these characters. And yeah, it should be pretty fun.
So here we have big numbers 1 and 2. I just quickly want to show off some of Sienkiewicz's other stuff here we have brought to light, and the Daredevil graphic novel. This might have been like the first time he painted a full comic. This thing is just gorgeous. Now, I spoke about Stray Toasters earlier. You can flip through this and see there's just a dozen styles being employed all throughout, and you can kind of see how, like, while Alan Moore is writing this in 1988, and this is coming out around that same time, and the subject matter is sort of about chaos theory, and there's just an overall chaotic approach to.
It was all the rage in the late 80s, early 90s. Chaos theory. Have you guys heard about it?
And that's an interesting point, because it kind of reached its peak with Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
In, like 92, 93?
93, yeah.
And when it all fell apart, Eastman basically said, we can try and do this. We can just find another artist. And they approached so many different artists. And this was Alan Moore's magnum opus. And they tried, and it just was not meant to be, I guess. And even Eddie Campbell at one point offered Alan Moore, after From Hell, he said, hey, are you still looking for an artist? I'd love to finish it. And by that point, Alan Moore was done. And I suspect part of it, when you get to the 2000s, it's sort of, there's so much of big numbers that was ahead of its time, like the chaos theory. He was talking about chaos theory in like 1988, and it, as I said, it had peaked in pop culture with maybe Jurassic Park. There's also interesting stuff here to do with like the internet and potentially internet dating tropes that he was writing in like 1988 that had become sort of well-trod path by the 2000s, and so yeah, he had just moved on, and then it was officially dead at that point. Okay, so let's look at big numbers number 1.
It's not very inviting. I just want to say that up off the top. I think I read like the first 5 pages, just being like, I'm sure this will come together, right?
Yeah, you know what? Actually, before we started this episode, I was telling my wife that I was doing it on big numbers, and she's like, well, what's it about? And I'm like, it's hard to explain. Not a lot happens, but a lot happens. Like, a woman is taking a nap on a train for the first 20 odd pages, and then a kid throws a rock through a window. She buys a pack of cigarettes, and that's the end of the first issue. So.
Well, yeah, the first issue is an introduction of 20 characters in Alan Moore's hometown of Northampton, and yeah, I mean it's just the day-to-day life of a lot of these people. So not terribly plot heavy, and we're not in a genre here. So it's not like you could have told your wife, oh, she's a police officer hunting a terrorist. But no, it's a woman has been away from town for 10 years, and she's come back.
Yeah, it's a kind of character piece more than anything. It's just kind of how does her reintroduction affect this environment?
Yeah, so the first two issues open up with a series of numbers.
Mm.
Alamore, there's a quote I have here where Alamore says, "We live in a field of numbers without noticing them, numbers everywhere." And this comic thematically is about chaos theory and the mathematics behind it. Moore wants to showcase all the numbers around us in everyday life, and so throughout this series, and especially as in the intro to every chapter, we're going to see just a series of numbers. And we open in Northampton, the setting of this story, and this is the first time Alan Moore has centered a story around his hometown, I believe. After Big Numbers, he'll produce the novels Voices of Fire and Jerusalem, which all center around Northampton. Which have you guys read any of those?
Jerusalem was I own it and I cherish it. No, I have not. I have not finished Jerusalem. Let's just put it like that.
I have considered. I think when he came out with one this year, I can't remember what it's called, and I've considered reading it, but much like Colin's experience with it, it does seem like it's like, make sure you got no distractions, because this is a tome, like a dense brick of information.
Yeah, he's a very descriptive guy. And I think comics can kind of curb that a little bit, because you have the artist, like, I guess the artist has to read all that description and then turn it into visuals. Whereas when it's just 100% Alan Moore, like this comic was probably a 250-page script, and we get to experience over the course of 40 pages. If this was a novel, this first chapter would probably be 250 pages.
Oh, that's a whole ass book.
Just to tell the audience, Jerusalem is a really pretty looking book. Like if you own it in hardcover or soft, soft cover is actually in a box set. I think it's a 2-book box set. I saw it in the bookstore the other day. It's really nice looking. It's like a really expensive piece of chocolate or a really expensive bottle of wine that you never open. You just have it on your shelf. You can look at it and be like, that's supposed to be one of the greatest things he ever wrote. There it is, right there. Yep.
Okay, so Bill Sienkiewicz describes this style as I said earlier, it's a photographic, soft focus, painterly airbrush style. Yeah, obviously very, very time consuming. But I mean, also there's a series of styles he uses. Like for instance, right here you see a pencil rendering drawing, and then it goes to that soft focus effect. So here we get to be introduced to this trio of kids. Moore's intention was to show these kids over the course of the series have like an escalating terror campaign.
Really?
Yeah, they're throwing rocks here at a passing train, but in the next issue that escalates, and apparently by issue 4 we'll have seen them like firebombing something.
Oh my god!
Which was based off like a real event in England around that time. There was something called like the Blackthorn firebombers, who were like 10-year-olds.
Oh wow!
So
England in the 80s is a wild place.
Yeah, you got the IRA and on the one side, and
yeah.
So yeah, these kids, they'll have gotten more and more extreme with every issue, and the intent was that the reader would get the impression that like by the end they might blow up this mall that is the center of the entire story. Just like fueling the sort of chaos that's all around. And what do you guys think of this effect?
Is that just like swiping on a Xerox?
Yeah, we talked about that on the Chris Bachalo episode.
Yeah.
Where,
I was about to bring that up. Yeah,
it looks to me like, he puts it in like a Xerox machine and he's moving the image while it's being scanned. And it has this great effect of like transitioning into a dream.
Yeah, it does. Especially with the paint and tape lines of just kind of breaking it up into, because I took them as the little slivers as you move right as panels.
Yeah, because something we bring up a lot is that like the gutter space between panels is time happening. So it has that sort of jarring effect of like, transitioning over. This opening sequence is such a perfect encapsulation of what, like, I think Bill Sienkiewicz intended to do with this series, was to just show a whole bunch of different techniques and styles. The style is chaotic. It's ever changing.
Yeah, there's some cartooning, there's some graphic design. The little dotted line makes me think of Family Circus.
Yeah.
I can't imagine if a 1990 audience reading this and really getting it right away, I guess.
The second page there, the middle panel, is just beautiful, man.
Yeah, just so soft and delicate, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
It's delicate. Especially with the harsh style of the previous page, of just like everything is so sharp and
yeah,
jagged.
and it executes like the rule of thirds like so perfectly too.
Yeah,
everything just hits just right.
Oh yeah, it does. Yeah, she's on the left third, and it causes your eye to drift forward. Yeah, it's great.
I think from my understanding of how Alan Moore writes scripts, I think he draws an entire comic out, and then he looks at that comic and transcribes everything he sees in front of him into a script, and that's why it's sort of detailed. And he generally doesn't share that comic he's produced with anybody. He just like gives them the script. However, when he was working on some Spawn comics, for one reason or another, he decided to share those layouts. And so in the
back of
Tony Daniel for Blood Feud, I remember that Spawn Blood Feud, and they printed them in the back.
Yeah, and also Violator. You can see Alan Moore drew a comic. So I spoke before about how like Bill Sienkiewicz is like this creative dynamo, and like you don't want to handcuff someone like that. So I think all writers say to the artist that their scripts aren't set in stone. If you come up with something better, do it. And apparently Alan Moore always says some variation of that as well.
Sure.
But I think Sienkiewicz felt like he couldn't deviate much at all. Like any sort of deviation in the storytelling would sort of upset the carefully designed rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
The comic is like a watch. Like if you mess around with the gears even a little, it just stops working. And and in some ways, I've seen people say that like Miller is like the ideal collaborator for Sienkiewicz because it's just so open. But I mean, at the same time, like there is a lot of opportunity here to play with style. I mean, there's no way like Alan Moore was like dictating the techniques and styles. I think he's the sort of like Alan Moore is sort of dictating the general layout. Like we'll see later on layouts that are very obviously like designed in the script phase. But yeah, what
again, that middle panel on the first page.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I love that angle shift too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love this like super realistic art that's sort of disrupted by this pen and ink sort of like a cartooning.
Yeah.
Like clearly not realistic. And it's so perfect because that is in her dream. So we get like a disruption of like what her dream of this sort of disruption could be, like the noise or whatever, and then we go back and forth to the reality. And that's sort of the effectiveness of playing with styles like this, because you can get the feeling of like, I don't know, jumping through realities or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I wanted to comment on this. Like, I love this sort of clip art sign language, which you guys have seen that in comics before, right?
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah. After this, like I think Sienkiewicz developed this. I think I recall seeing it in some Daredevil comics by David Mack.
It's also in Hawkeye comic,
right?
By David Aja.
Yeah. So yeah, he's just this creative force of nature that's constantly creating new tools that his peers come and grab and put in their comics. So. Here's the chapter page. So in interviews around this time, Alan Moore talked about his intent with these chapter pages. The series is largely inspired by chaos theory and fractal mathematics. And one of the principles of fractal mathematics is that there isn't such thing as chaos. There's just levels of complexity that we have previously not been capable of grasping. Yeah, like a good example is like I think you can look at like the stock market and it may look like a giant mess, but there's order in that mess. You can kind of make sense of it by like finding patterns throughout history, and like those patterns are basically emotions. Like buy and sell are largely based on emotions,
right?
And like that's just one example of I guess the idea behind fractal mathematics. And I guess another theory is that like I guess you can look like at an aerial view of a traffic jam and sort of like find patterns. Like the theory goes that you can look at almost anything and find order. And yeah, and that's like my most basic explanation of it. I'm sure an expert of fractal mathematics would have some issues with my description, but that's the best I could like grasp of it. But anyway, the intent with the title pages was to show, I guess, a beautiful piece of imagery that looks like chaos and looks like a giant mess. But after you've read 12 issues of this and after you've sort of been educated on the idea behind fractal mathematics, on a reread, you'll ideally look at all these chapter pages and sort of like, I guess, be able to see it in a different light. I guess that's the intention. And it's I think the chapter 2 example is probably a better example, which we'll get to eventually.
I think the page after this chapter page is the one on the right is when it started to come together for me. Of like, oh, okay, it's not going to all be this. There is going to be dialogue and structure to it.
To get to the chapter page, how many pages previous? Like 10?
Oh no, this is like 5 pages in. Or sorry, oh no, you're right. 8 pages. This is 8 pages in. Yeah.
Oh wow.
See, so like that's a quarter of the book gone.
Yeah, that's which.
I mean, you're dealing with 40 pages, and you kind of want to set the tone.
It's just that when I first read it, so again, I read it under the preconceived notion this is supposed to be the greatest thing ever, right? So
Oh, no.
I'm 10 pages in, you get to the chapter page, and it's like really nothing's happened yet, but a lot's happened so far. I've been introduced to like 4 or 5 characters and so on and so forth. So now a quarter of the book is done, and really I don't know anything.
Yeah.
Well,
you could say you don't know anything, but you're in her head here. Like this says so much about her mental state, which maybe doesn't make sense right now, but after you've read the whole thing and on a reread, this dream probably makes a lot more sense.
It's laying seeds for stuff that will come up later on.
A lot, yeah.
So this is Christine Gathercole, the character. Interestingly, the model for this that Bill Sienkiewicz used, I guess at the end of issue 2, he attends her wedding and gives her, I guess, a gift of original art and basically says, what's going on, like with your honeymoon? Like I gotta set up the next issue. And she basically tells him she's going on her honeymoon to Germany and she's not coming back.
Wow.
And that's like just another wrench in the works of just like, now you can't photograph your main character anymore. You got to solve that. And throughout this entire thing, there's just so many problems with the models that he ends up hiring. So we get a like endearing thing here. How can you tell that she's a novelist? Like she's not. Like, I think a hackier writer would have had like a conversation with this elderly couple where she announces to them that she's a writer. But how do you communicate somebody's a writer through visuals?
Oh, yeah.
Like this is time and time again throughout this, we're going to see how Alan Moore is expertly communicating ideas and information, not by having awkward exposition where people are just announcing things. You just have to infer stuff from the visuals or from the dialogue. And right here, she she passes by a book stand, and it's kind of an endearing thing where like she sees her own book clearly and then shuffles things around and moves her book to the front. And then you see her name, and there's a bit of acting here where you see her smile, like she's pretty proud of her work or whatever.
And she's looking at it, right?
I do that every time I see your book at Chapters or Indigo.
So you had that exact same smile. So basically, this character, she's coming back to Northampton after being away for 10 years. Her arc, basically, this series is her journey to write her new novel.
Yeah.
There's a funny thing here where you see these scribbles all throughout.
Mm-hmm.
Al Columbia was Sienkiewicz's assistant at the time, and he described Sienkiewicz's trademark as making a very realistic image and then destroying it in the end process.
It gives it a feel of rain or just moisture in general, and I don't know if that's intentional for this book or if it's just something that Sienkiewicz does, and it just happens to suit Northampton.
Well, I mean,
so well.
That's an aspect in all of his work, and I guess you may get that effect here. But do you get that effect like all throughout when he uses that effect? Like right here, he's scribbling on top there.
No, but yeah, a lot of times it does feel like it. Even when it is, I mean, inside it shouldn't be raining, right? That's just not what's happening. But it does give me the feel of rain on the outside, or there's something in the air that is magnifying light, I guess.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I suspect the process is just to sort of loosen up a static image, just bring it more life. And that's how Al Columbia described his artwork, and you can see a lot of that there. But again, there's like 100 different styles going on here, and so it's not always the case that he's drawing a realistic image and then scribbling over it. But I did find it interesting. Like that is sort of his trademark, is to like draw a beautiful image and then just throw some random splatter. Like you see some splatter here, and just like here, and just a lot of scribbles here. Like
yeah, the scribbles.
It looks like he drew this and then did some pencil scribbles.
If you take that middle row, that panel that you were just pointing at, where she's sitting next to the ghost of her deceased daughter, the spackles in the cab, you have like a plexiglass behind you that separates the driver from the passengers, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of I think he's trying to maybe possibly channel that for his for all the spackles and stuff, because it's always dirty. It's not perfectly clean, right? And there's scratches and stuff on it too.
Yeah, it's a good effect. So this character right here is Kevin Pittock, the taxi driver. And in the dialogue, he alludes to an accident. We would have eventually learned that there was an accident he was involved with that is connected with another character. And a lot of this series is about like character connections. And I'll explain what that is later. But like Alan Moore is not coming out and telling you everything right away. He's just sort of hinting at the backgrounds of these characters. Like, for instance, you said her deceased daughter here. This is basically her being haunted by a phantom child. And we know from the dialogue, this is the product of an abortion. Like she alludes to like 10 years ago, she was pregnant when she was last in town. And a little boy or little girl, he asks, and she said little operation. And then she looks over. And so this is telling you that she is haunted by it. So she's nonchalant about it, which he clearly is offended. And for a story purpose, like his characterization, like, yeah, he's got a pregnant wife at home. But this does tell you she is haunted by it. This happened 10 years ago, and this like phantom child is following her around.
Yeah.
Which pays off a little bit. Like my intent is to explain Alan Moore's intention and where this was all going as we get through the story. But here we get to the United States. And
it's supposed to be the United States?
Yep. This is
okay. I thought
Bank
it was
of
like
America.
London. Oh yeah, okay.
This is basically the United States sort of like bringing their I don't know, their sensibilities to this ugly mall-like structure. I guess like mall culture is from the United States, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think they developed in the late 70s in California, and they just kind of quickly spread. But yeah, I think in Britain they're not that popular just because so many buildings are so old, or there's just not enough space. They're just kind of It's not that they don't exist in Britain, but it's definitely not.
Like Eric, you can attest when you came to visit me. There's a lot of inside outside malls, right?
Yeah.
Inside outside.
For the viewers, yeah, Colin lived in England in like 2000.
Right. Yeah, I lived in England for a couple of years, and Eric came to visit me one time, and yeah, there's a lot of like, because they're preserving a lot of old architecture too, right? So they're kind of just like, it's not a bank anymore. It's a McDonald's, or it's whatever.
Yeah, they hollow stuff out.
They have to preserve it.
So let me explain these characters a bit. These are the Spitlers. They're going to manage them all, and then this is the architect, Stephen Judge. So basically, this is a couple that will be managing them all, and they and their families will move to Northampton for this new mall that they'll be involved in developing.
That mall design looks so alien.
I mean, it's supposed to be just like
the ugliest piece of architecture that you ever see.
Yeah. So this character, Stephen Judge, the architect, is the model Sienkiewicz used was an actual architect, and his two sons, the two sons of Stephen Judge, this character, were like the models were the actual architect's two sons as well. And I think I alluded to before, between issues 2 and 3, one of those sons has a growth spurt, adding like 6 inches to their height, and so things just kept going wrong for him. But here, like again, this issue is just all character introductions. So here we get to meet 2 characters. This is Monica Beard. She's basically a shoplifter. You're going to have a mall centering around a story. You got to have a character shoplifter, right?
Yep.
So we see she's being released from prison, and I love how he draws her. Unlike other characters, he draws her with these like frantic lines. It does give like a very ominous quality to her, even though I think the intent with her was that she becomes very endearing. Even though she like looks like she's being set up as like the villain of the series or something.
I assumed it was gonna. We're seeing how the cop sees her, which is he's very antagonistic towards her, like actively. And it just seemed like, especially with the dream sequence, that you're not getting a truthful narration. You're getting very subjective presentations of people.
Well, and something interesting about this is, so this police officer is going to be a big character. His Peter Gautry, and I said that she is going to end up becoming a very endearing character, but he is just not a good character. Like he's just a real piece of work, one might say. And having read 2 issues, you wouldn't know this, but like the intent later on was you were to find out that this is Christine's ex-boyfriend, the father of that aborted baby.
Okay.
Yeah, you would have found that out eventually, but
yeah, that tracks. Just showing up at an old lady getting released from prison to be like, hey, don't go stealing more things. It does have a kind of sinisterly ominous quality to his presence.
Yeah. And again, with good, like, fun ways of communicating information. Alan Moore could have easily written the police officer saying, like, you've been in prison for 18 months. But what is a better way to communicate that? She's waiting on a bus stop, and this little old lady is just like, how long have you been waiting for the bus? And her response is just sort of 18 months. And I love, like, goodness. So that's just a fun way of communicating that she was in prison for 18 months. And again, we get more numbers. We're in a sea of numbers. And so this is a brief introduction here to another character, Colin Wordsworth, which he's a real charmer, eh?
I love the last names of everybody in this. There's so many like stereotypical British last names. Wordsworth.
That's great. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so what else? We've got we've got the Indian couple, I guess, or the Asian couple. What should
I
Never
think they're
heard of them.
Tamil. I think they're Tamil.
what does that mean? I'm an ignorant white guy.
From Tamil Nadu in India. They're Indian.
Yeah,
They're Indian. They're Indian. Go.
So this is the shop.
They're not
Shopkeeper
my
build-
kind of Indian, but they're Indian.
What is your kind of Indian?
Punjabi Indian.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Do you know what they speak?
So they're speaking Urdu, I think.
Oh, okay.
That's what my mother-in-law says. I showed this to my mother-in-law, and she's like, "I can't read that. That's Urdu."
Oh, interesting.
Oh, I read online they're speaking Gurnuki.
Gurnukti.
Yeah, that's just what I read online, but I might be wrong.
Well, she couldn't speak it. She just thought it was what it was. Urdu.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, so this is the shopkeeper, Dilba Odidra, and the shopkeeper's wife, Gravi Odidra, who's she's a social worker, and their whole thing is that a lot of their dialogue speaks to like their marital problems. He's like sort of obsessed with his train set.
Yeah, he seemed to be kind of folding in on himself, just kind of hiding away.
Yeah, there's a lot of clever stuff to do with him and his train set, which we'll get in later. But the backstory behind these two is they both immigrated from Uganda, escaping Idi Amin. And I think they're kind of loosely based off some people that Alan Moore knew in Northampton at the time, specifically an Indian couple that like escaped Uganda. Moore describes the shopkeeper as a Thatcherite who believes wholeheartedly in free enterprise. So his belief would have been tested later on in the story by a mall coming to town.
Okay. It's interesting that he's using the actual language script. So there are some people in Britain who are going to be able to clock what everybody's saying.
What I love about Alan Moore actually is that he'll, without any translation, he will actually have the the dialogue of whatever nationality they are, and no subtitles or anything like that. And it makes the comic feel a little bit more, obviously, worldly, but I don't know how it works out in translations when, whatever country that it's being republished in. But I do like that in the North American copy, that you don't understand what they're saying because they are speaking. Like I've had my mother and my mother-in-law both translate the Punjabi dialogue in this and in Captain Nemo.
Okay.
And they're actually quite impressed with what's being said, and they actually have an interest to invest in the characters. And in this case, I mean, she couldn't read this part, but in the next issue, there's like really perfectly written Punjabi dialogue that she was able to read for me.
Oh, that's very cool.
Cool. So yeah, moving on. I like this bit of negative space here that gets filled with the cat calling. And it's just such a great pose, communicating fast walking.
And it's great for the cat calling too. Like everything has dropped out. She's the focus of these shitty dudes saying these shitty things, and
she's kind of tensed up, trying to hide from it.
Yeah, it's a great visual use of that.
Yeah, so here we meet Christine's sister, Janice Gathercole.
Gathercole.
Yeah, so she references seeing her boyfriend Keith later. She comments that one of the advantages of dating her boyfriend Keith is that there are very few surprises. So Alan Moore is setting up a mystery that pays off at the end of issue 3. Every time Keith is mentioned, there's another clue as to what is up with this boyfriend of hers, Keith Peach, which is just like a fun sort of like layering way of like introducing all these characters and investing you in things. Like another clue we're given here is that he hasn't aged in 5 years.
Yeah, it was I think there's dialogue later on that I thought, oh, okay. This is going to be interesting. Like, this is an interestingly written, interestingly designed book that you wouldn't expect in 1990.
Yeah, and so speaking earlier about like how Alan Moore is designing the page in the script, like knowing how Alan Moore scripts, it's very clear to me that he came up with this idea of just like the iron moving across like 3 panels.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, you get like the Sienkiewicz edition of sort of like a view of the living room where it's just a pencil sketch versus the more painterly aspect to drawing. Like things are always shifting, and I think Sienkiewicz is always keeping things interesting for himself.
Yeah, and I love the use of negative space in the next page, because they've set up so well just how ugly this mall is going to be. So oh, that's the model of the mall. Okay.
So I guess they're talking about supervising the project, and they mentioned Carol, the market analyst. So this is the first mention of that character, who is going to be an important character, or was going to be an important character. He in the next issue he's referred to as not being there, and then in issue 3 he's sort of mentioned when they get to the airport. He's mentioned as like them not being there, and then we finally get to meet him at the end of issue 3. But it's a nice effect of like adding a mystery to an important character, setting up expectations where like they're always referred to but like never there, so that
Right.
when they do show up it feels like an important thing, because he becomes a very important character, especially for like Christine.
Okay. I'm gonna have to check out this this extrapolation website.
Yeah, it's very interesting, but just like it is a lot to read.
Yeah.
So here for this sequence we get to meet 4 more characters. Again, this is just all meeting characters. So we get to see mental patients, Mr. Killingback and Mr. World. They're both discharged.
Yeah.
And they're discharged due to like governmental cutbacks. And this is Christine's mother right here, Audrey Gathercole. Yeah, they're all leaving a psychiatric hospital, and apparently this was happening in Northampton around the time. Margaret Thatcher was cutting back on like health expenditures, so mental hospitals had to like close down parts of their facilities, and like
Mental
So
patients
at-risk
were
people
being
were being released. Yeah.
like mental patients were being released to the care of the communities.
Oh yeah. When
It was like it was apparent to more at the time that just like wandering the streets that there was just a lot more people just like babbling to themselves or whatever.
yeah, the I think it's in a few pages.
Oh,
Grim
well, yeah,
stuff.
right. Yeah, so because we get to meet this other character. This is Hillary. She's married to that builder, the cat caller that we mentioned
Okay.
earlier, and she's like an old friend of the mother. But yeah, this page you're referring to where he fantasizes.
Yeah, grim stuff.
You know what? This is actually, it's horrific, but it's a great page.
It is,
Really
yeah,
great.
because it's
yes.
Very jarring.
yeah.
And then you come
Yeah.
back to
Reality. Like it was a wise thing. Like usually when we shift perspectives, it's like, oh, now we're in a cartoon world, so that's a flashback. But this was a wise effect on Sienkiewicz's part to keep things generally in the same style, to make you believe this is actually happening and go like, holy crap. And then, within a panel we realize, oh no, that was just in his head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the pullback to include the people, the seat in front of her too, just so we're all clear, we're back to reality.
So this character this would-be serial killer is Mr. World.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the series, we would have seen him fantasizing and planning to violently kill people.
Yeah, I think we see him a second time in issue 2.
Yeah, over the next couple of issues. Yeah, he would have been a small part of the story as we see him slowly get more obsessed with Christine to plan her murder.
Okay.
But by the final issue, an inexplicable, like seemingly random car accident involving another important character would have caused his death. And I think like his story is kind of a microcosm of what Moore was trying to say with this series. A death from a car accident may seem like a chaotic freak accident up close, but as we would have seen throughout the series, there's a vast web of important moments that would have led up to that event. Basically, one thing leads to another. It's like a butterfly effect.
That's very cool, especially to have it happen in a pretty mundane way. A different writer would have been like, and then Christine kills him in self-defense, or
Yes.
or he trips on his own knife, or something, not just like it's a random seeming act.
Yeah, and I'll say it's that taxi driver basically who, in his past, he had experienced a car accident and things were looking up for him, and then he has another car accident, and then it just like goes completely downhill from there. But to do with the like domino effect of lives, like the taxi driver's wife ends up in a better situation. Like it's always, yeah, it's basically the butterfly effect, which I think that might have been a new concept. Well, actually, I don't know. Like, how old is that idea of the butterfly effect?
Well, it's a big part of the Jurassic Park novel, which was published in '85, I want to say, because each chapter opens up with this kind of graphic representation of chaos theory, this ever-growing complexity. But I think that's when it first enters like public consciousness. I'm sure. I think it was developed originally in the 70s with punch card computers. They were trying to predict weather patterns by feeding it the same variables each day to see if it would come up with something new. And they accidentally mispunched one of the cards and they get a completely different answer.
Oh wow.
And that's how they realize is like, oh, this small mistake has led to a completely different outcome.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Christine on this page calls a couple of people. She's new in town, and one of them she calls her father, Bobby Gathercole. So with this, we learn that her parents are divorced, and yeah, I mean, it's just such great dialogue communicating the frustration of an adult talking to their elderly parent.
This entire sequence is kind of like, oh, this is rough. Like calling people, her just calling people.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like,
so
oh,
yeah,
that's sad.
In this sequence, Bobby Gathercole is talking with the vicar, who would be another important character, and the model for the father was Stan Drake, who was a newspaper strip cartoonist that was a studio mate and father figure and artistic mentor to Bill Sienkiewicz.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that name does sound familiar.
So Christine calls another childhood friend, Vicky, slow, and to speak to what you were saying, Taylor, like how sad it is, where she's saying, "Hi, it's Christine," and Christine who?
Yeah, it's just kind of like, oof, rough.
Well, it's 10 years is 10 years, man.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is that she was expecting, but
it's pre-social media days, you know.
And it's a good insight into Christine's character too, I think, in that she didn't think people would forget her. She didn't think, she was like, no, this place stays the same, but she is very quickly reminded, no, their lives went on without you and they weren't that concerned.
So this friend, Vicky Slow, is married to Brian Slow, the history teacher we'll meet later. Or in fact, in the very next page. So yeah, so this woman with the child here, the child who's like torturing the cat, she's married to this man here, Brian Slow. And he's sort of a character to communicate the history of Northampton to the audience.
Something Alan Moore absolutely loves.
Yeah, he thinks it's like the center of the universe or something? Or?
He thinks it's the center of the universe.
Yeah, he absolutely loves it.
But I mean, yeah, you get to hear about the history, and you get so Brian Slow's story is his frustration with the hopelessness of teaching these kids. But yeah, his whole thing would be that like he holds up a memory of a very promising kid from way back in the day, someone who he can't fully remember. It's like Kenny something, and that memory sort of convinces him that he can make a difference. So we also meet here one of probably, if there's like the three most important characters of this series, it's probably like Christine, and then the analyst Carol, and then Sammy. He's like a prodigy of some kind. Like he understands all the chaos theory that is behind the scenes. Like he's read up on all that stuff.
Oh.
And he knows about fractal math and everything.
Huh. I did not clock that at all. I thought he stands out in such a weird way.
In issue 3, you'll see he like educates his father a little bit on some some of the fractal like chaos theory. So yeah, I mean, I love this like sporadic chaotic effect of like the kids running.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so beautifully done by Sienkiewicz, just to communicate a crowd shot in such an interesting way.
Yeah, it's impressionistic. It's which you don't see in comics very often.
Yeah. So yeah, here we get to meet Sammy's father, Hildy, and here's a picture of Sammy's deceased mother, so Hildy's wife, who's a white woman.
How old is Sammy supposed to be?
Teenager.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, because there were times where I'm like, oh yeah, he's a kid, and other times I'm like, no, that's a full-grown adult man, right?
It's a grown-ass man.
Yeah, he just looks
kind
like
of a chaos theory and stuff.
well, he's like the same eye level with his dad, but I guess like so was I when I was 16. So
yeah. Okay, so yeah, I mean, this panel sort of encapsulates Hildy's deal. He's like clinically depressed. He never got over her death, basically.
Yeah, he hasn't dealt with it.
So we're back to the US, and there's a reference to like a role-playing game that like the company's gonna like give this like role-playing game that the kids can test it out. But there's an interesting moment here where like they talk to the Spitler couple, and they ask do you have kids, and she basically very loudly proclaims, so God, no. And that's just sort of like hint at something to do with their relationship. He's sort of like posed in a specific way where he's like, no children. And well, and basically like, well, I'll explain later because it's there's such connections with all these different characters that here we get the mother and the daughter being reunited.
See this page, that top panel, again, rule of thirds, great stuff. But it gives me like all the white lines. I know it's not raining, but again, it just feels like, no, there's moisture hanging in the air. It's just, there's a dampness to this whole thing.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That is, and that is very cool that it could give off that effect. Okay, so here we have we have more references to Keith Peach, the mystery boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so here's the sister right here, and she's gonna go off to see her boyfriend, and she says right here like, oh, should I say hello to him for you? And she's like, well, if you think it'll help.
I can't tell if he's dead or in a coma. Which one is it?
Well, we'll see at the end of issue 3.
All right.
Yeah, and then there's like another reference where like she's going to visit him, and we'd never get him through the door, basically. Yeah, and this is another thing about like being a creative and having a family, basically. Like, well, I don't know, Taylor, has your wife read all of your comics?
No. I get her to look over work in progress to see if it makes sense, but no.
Yeah, I mean, like my wife, she wants to be supportive, and she likes comics. She likes reading, but she's a manga reader, and just no interest in my work. So but this is an interesting bit where it's just like, her mother hasn't read her book, and that's something like every creative has gone through. Like, sometimes your family is just not into your work, and we'll see next issue. She's like trying to read the book, and she just does not get it.
Colin, do you show your wife the stuff you're working on?
Yeah, once in a while. She what I show her, she likes. I think it's just the unconditional love.
It's all we can ask for, right?
Yeah.
And this is a sort of reaction to that right here. The like being frustrated that your mom isn't into your work, and she like almost tries to tear up her book.
But this scene also provides a sort of contrast with the scene at the beginning where she's proudly putting her book in front of all the other books on the shelf.
I think there's a dueling nature to being a creative. There's a healthy mix of almost prideful arrogance alongside miserable self-loathing. And I think pairing this scene with the one at the beginning really sells that.
And then here we get a montage of all the characters we've seen. We see the taxi drivers popping pills, and we see her mother has a unique relationship going on here. and the depressed father being put to bed by his son, and I guess the serial killer going and grabbing a kebab.
Just thinking about stabbing meat, I guess.
And then like this character thinks like this is killing back, and he thinks he's an alien from another planet, so he's looking at the stars. And here we have the history teacher and the wife, and the wife is just going through some stuff, and yeah, the Indian couple, and there's the pastor, and yeah, everybody's going through stuff. And yeah, a lot of that like is trying to get you into their headspace.
I really like the kind of gathering of everybody, because this is almost towards the end of this issue, right?
Yeah, this is basically the end.
Yeah, I like this kind of you know what it makes me think of is the end of every season of The Wire, where you get the montages of what's going on.
Yeah.
Just kind of like, just so you all remember what Marlowe and and Snoop and everybody are doing.
And it's good to do this for this first issue because it just introduces so many characters, and it just sort of like reinforces that all of these characters are important and that we will come back to all these characters. But for the final scene, we go back to the U.S. We've been introduced to this monstrosity of a mall that they're planning on developing, and like the sort of like big ending is like, oh, we're gonna build it in this town.
Yeah, Northampton.
And Moore is quoted as basically saying that like this mall is going to sort of cast a shadow on this fragile community. And yeah, here he said like generally the end of book 1 is Galactus's spaceship touching down on Earth, and he's going to destroy everything unless the Avengers come and stop him. He said, I wanted to do something that was as dynamic and powerful as that, but which wasn't as silly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I noticed on the credits on the back page there, Phyllis Moore, his wife, and Deborah Delano,
right,
their shared girlfriend.
Yes, yeah, because they were the Mad Love is the publishing company, and they basically ran it, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that relationship kind of crumbles, and then the final Mad Love comic is this one, I guess, and then that's when Kevin Eastman comes in and like, helps out to take over. But also the Al Columbia is thanked in this, which like I guess it becomes an issue where like Al Columbia didn't help as much in this issue, but helped quite a bit in this issue, and he didn't get a thank you. So there's You know, I've run into that myself, where like with credits, where like somebody wasn't included in a credit, which is the worst feeling in the world, to contribute to something and then they don't end up in the credit. And like I wasn't 100% to blame, but like, you know, the proof is sent over to like 5 people, and everybody puts their eyes on it, and so I hold myself to blame for like not catching like someone ending up in the credits. And I'm embarrassed to say it's happened like twice in my short time doing comics. And that's too much. So I just like, I'm trying to be on top of that as much as possible going forward. So yeah, this is like this is a map of Northampton and the plot of land that I guess Alan Moore pictured the mall would go to.
Yeah, it's a good companion to the map there.
Yeah, when he's interviewed like a decade later, he basically says that's all full now of like warehouses, and like there's a Toys R Us and stuff. So this will be a 2-parter. I guess that wasn't the original plan, but this episode is super long, and in the next part we will cover Big Numbers issue 2 and 3 and go into more detail on what happens with all those characters, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, me too. Because I didn't get a chance to check out number 3, so it's going to be all new to me.
All right, everybody, that's it for this episode. Next episode, we're going to be covering number 2 and 3. Thank you so much for watching. Please comment and subscribe, and don't forget to like the video. And we'll see you next time.
Cool.